Hello, Bill.
Hello, Matt.
Welcome to our first Obama's second term well, technically not the second term yet, but post-election DMZ show. And congratulations, I think you were pretty much spot on with your predictions.
I was pretty close. I'm not quite in the Nate Silver stratosphere, but I said on Twitter and Facebook 347 electoral votes and 52% popular. And right now we're looking at, I think it's 332, assuming they put Florida in Obama's column, and 50% popular vote, although I think there's a lot of West Coast mail votes that haven't come in yet. So maybe he can eke it out to 51, I don't know. But I'm not too shabby. But as a general matter, I did think it was essentially a swing state sweep, which was almost correct. And I thought there would be a bit more of a final break towards Obama above and beyond what the polls were saying, that there's sort of too late of a break for the polls to pick up on. And that maybe was, ever so slightly correct, but certainly not to the degree that I was expecting. So not bad for me.
I thought you were – look, I thought that there was, at least a 50% chance Obama would win. So I'm not surprised that Obama won. But I thought you were drinking a little bit too much Kool-Aid, Bill. I thought you were a little bit too optimistic for your side. It turns out you were pretty much right on. So kudos to you.
Thank you very much
for sensing.
But I do sense on the right. Maybe you're not a minority. You might have a better sense of the proportion of this. But I spent part of my morning listening to Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh because I'm petty like that, and. They're just, they seem very shattered. They really believed that the polls were wildly skewed and the sampling was biased and there was a media conspiracy. And, how could CNN have a dead heat poll with Democrats 11 points over Republicans and the party sampling? That's impossible. Rush Limbaugh literally saying on the air an hour ago, looking at the exit polls, none of this makes sense. He just seems incapable of reconciling the previous narrative to the numbers on the page, and you don't seem to have you don't seem to be that discombobulated about what's going on.
Well, I guess a couple of things. First, let me say I was surprised, not that Obama won, but by the scope of the win, and even more significantly by all those targeted Senate seats that almost universally went to the Dems. So I think it was a big deal election, and I don't think it was just a bad candidate or the luck of the draw or that Sandy changed everything. And I understand where Rush was coming from in a sense. I mean, there was a lot of conventional wisdom that said things like, if an incumbent's below 50%, he can't win. Or whoever wins the independents will win. And I think in a lot of those target states, Romney did win the independents, but all that conventional wisdom was wrong. And I think that's a good warning to all of us that all of these kind of sacred cows and things that smart people say that I'll give you a classic one that we all I think believe is that Republicans have to win Ohio to be president, and that has historically been the case, but doesn't mean it has to happen. And we shouldn't rely on conventional wisdom so much. But Bill, I tell you, I am not upset. For a variety of reasons. For one thing, I have a life, and I have a beautiful family, and we're about to add another addition to it. And I believe in America, and America's been through tough times before. And look, who knows? This is kind of philosophical and whatnot. I believe that you should fight for your side and try to elect the person that you believe is best, but you never know what is best. I mean, in 1976, I would have probably supported Gerald Ford over Jimmy Carter, but I think it's probably a good thing that Carter won, and that gave us Ronald Reagan. And you've long been on the losing, winning is losing, losing is winning sometimes notion. But do you have a sense here how winning might be losing in this case? Is there something on the horizon that you think? I'm trying. First of all, I believe work as if it all depends on you, praise as if it all depends on God. I mean, work hard to elect your God, but then if he loses, step back and say, I don't know everything, and maybe you never know how things are going to shake out. I think that sometimes losing is winning, winning is losing. I mean, you could argue that if Romney had won, it would have persuaded Republicans that there was nothing wrong, that they didn't have to do any soul searching, and it might have forced them to ignore some serious demographic changes and all sorts of other things for a lot longer. And maybe this will be a wake-up call, and maybe rather than having Mitt Romney, who, as Charles Krauthammer, I think, aptly said last night, was sort of always a transitional figure. Use a football analogy. I'm a Redskins fan. We signed Donovan McNabb a couple years ago. We never thought Donovan McNabb was the quarterback of the future. We always thought Donovan McNabb was sort of a placeholder to get us to the promised land, which was our quarterback of the future, who ended up being RG3, we think, we hope, we believe. So I think that, look, the Republican field is very strong. The bench, that is, Marco Rubio, Bobby Jindal, Mike Pence. I used to say Chris Christie. I mean, Suzanne Martinez, Nikki Haley. I'll get on the list. Paul Ryan, whatever. And I think that if you consider the strong field and also the fact that maybe this will be a wake-up call, that Republicans will, as I say, modernize, not moderate, this could end up, being a fine thing. I mean, look, I hope that the country survives. I hope that we don't add another $5 trillion to the debt in the next 4 years. I mean, but there's nothing I can do about it at this point. I think that's the most positive way to look at all this.
Well, I'm curious if you could flesh this out for me. I saw you wrote your post today. The party's got to modernize and not moderate. And just sort of let's break this down for a bit here. You have pretty big regions of the country that Republicans just can't compete in right now. There's about 203 electoral votes that are just off the board. And I mean, I think that's the number, if I remember my calculations correctly. I think it's about 230 or so that Obama won by 5 points or more. And so that's a pretty tough place to start with geographically. Plus, big blowouts with the youth vote, big blowouts with the Latino vote, which is growing. It was up to 10% of the vote this time around. It was only 5%, I believe, over 10 years ago. And the women vote, the gender gap was there. Not only did Obama did better with women than Romney did with men, but as we've seen in past elections, more women vote than men. So it's a doubly bad problem for Republicans, and they can't compete well with women right now. So you got this pretty big demographic hurdle and pretty geographic hurdle. So how? I'm not trying to argue it's an impossible challenge, but how do you reach to those areas of the country without completely sacrificing what it is to make sure conservatives? I wouldn't expect that. I mean, if I wouldn't suggest you have to be a liberal Democrat to win. Obviously, that would sort of defeat the purpose of being a conservative Republican. But you got to do something different. There's got to be some kind of change, right? I mean, it can't just be a communications problem at this point, is it?
Well, the temptation will be the quick fix, which is Rubio Martinez 2016, which is not a bad idea, but I don't think that you can assume that just by fielding the right candidates or candidates that might appeal to a more diverse coalition in and of itself solves the problem. Look, I think that first of all, Republicans need to take this seriously. I was prepared to write a post. If you're a writer, as things happen, you start to say, well, what's the story? What's the narrative? What's the lesson from this, right? Well, if it had been a close election and Romney had just lost Ohio, I would have probably written that he was a flawed candidate, that it was a mistake, to nominate a guy who was easily portrayed as Gordon Gekko, a guy who couldn't appeal to Reagan Democrats, kind of working class whites in the Rust Belt or whatever. But that didn't turn out to be the case. And it wasn't just the electoral, thumping that Republicans got. But it was also, if you looked at around the Senate races, anything that was close went to the Democrats, it seemed to me. I mean, Flake won, but that shouldn't have been close. That should have been a gimme for Republicans. Right. So I think there's some serious fundamental problems that need to be addressed. Now, I wrote a piece right after the election Tuesday night calling for Republicans to do some soul searching, and predictably some of my conservative friends, I think, thought that I was urging them to sell out their values. So I wrote a follow-up piece talking about modernization, not moderation. And my theory is A couple things. First, any political party that seeds or just writes off young people, college-educated people, and Hispanics cannot win, and frankly should not win. We need to appeal to, yes, we need to do a better job. I would say we, Republicans. I'm a conservative, not necessarily a partisan, but Republicans need to do a better job of appealing, certainly to sort of blue-collar workers in the Rust Belt, but they also need to win urbanites and college-educated folks, and they're just not doing it. Young people. I mean, if you look at the exit polls, from what I understand, about 72% of Hispanics voted for Obama. Romney actually, according to Philip Klein at the Examiner, essentially matched Ronald Reagan with white voters. Ronald Reagan's landslide ended up being Mitt Romney's landslide loss, with essentially the same percentage of white voters. Clearly, something needs to change. Now, look, I think that when you rebrand and reinvent a party, and clearly the Republican Party needs to do that, some of it is aesthetics, some of it's design, some of it's superficial. In some cases, I think it's actually sort of recommitting to first principles. It may be that we are going to be the party of life, plain and simple. But there may also be things that change. I mean, I think that, this is the beginning. There needs to be a big debate. But what does the party stand for? I think that it's time to have that discussion. And it may be, I'm not sure how it's going to end up turning out. I don't feel like it's not. I mean, the Democrats have long had the problem of being what do you stand for problem, because they've been ideologically diverse, and the messaging can be muddled, and they tend to kind of chase the latest thing. And I think with Obama, you're having less and less that sort of problem, because he is defining the brand of the party on his principles, and I think that's working out. But Republicans, I mean, I don't feel like there's a question of what the core conservative principles are, Republicans adhering to them. It's a question of how do they apply them, and to what degree are they being overly simplistic about it? I think there are real cleavages. I mean, I think, like, for example, I myself and a lot of conservatives are very pro-immigration, very pro-Hispanic immigration.
Well, that's a split. That's a modified
Marco
split.
Rubio, Jeb Bush, who supported a form of the DREAM Act, and there are other parts of the conservative coalition that are very anti-immigrant. Or they'll say, "Well, I'm just against illegal immigration." And some of them are, but some of them just don't want more people coming here.
Yeah, I think that's a split in the party. It's long been a split in the Democratic Party, too. It's been an issue that transcends party, although I think the Democrats have mostly reconciled their rift on it. Obama ran pretty hard for comprehensive immigration reform, also arguing that he has taken the lead on border security, too, and I think having that dual message has helped alleviate any internal Democratic rifts. And now I think that issue is probably going to be something that Republicans just have to fight out.
There are also rifts concerning foreign policy and national security. I mean,
sure.
Is the Republican Party going to be a party that pays any price, bears any burden, interventionist party, or is it going to be an anti-interventionist party? And certainly there are a lot of Rand Paul supporters, and throw him in the mix of people that could run and maybe win in 2016, who are vastly different than the Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, Kelly Ayotte faction. So I think that there really is some intellectual stuff to do. Now, how about this? Gay marriage. I think this is a discussion to have. It's entirely.
Why even discuss it anymore? It's over. It's done.
Not within the Republican Party. It's not.
That train's left the station. Just give that one up.
This is a huge deal that happened right up until yesterday. I believe I'm correct that gay marriage had always failed when it came to a vote. It passed when judges, ruled in its favor. But I don't think that the voters until yesterday had ever passed it, and now they have in two states, I think.
And Obama obviously planted his flag on the subject and paid no political price whatsoever for it. I mean, anyone has to see that, generationally speaking, what direction that issue was going in. You're maybe you want to be William F. Buckley and stand on the mountain yelling "Stop" in the face of history, but I don't think it's much of a way to build a party's future. So I just think
I think most conservatives today essentially believe in civil unions. I mean, I don't think that there's anybody. Well, I'm sure there's somebody, but certainly I think most.
That wasn't the case 10 years ago.
Well, but until recently, Barack Obama was, against gay.
All right,
I mean,
sure.
Until a couple months ago. So, I mean, it's not like they're vastly behind, but I hate to say behind because that implies that this history is moving in one direction or whatnot. But in any event, I think it's a topic that needs to be discussed because, to me, the life issue is non-negotiable. The Republican Party has to be the party of life, and I think it'd be stupid not to be.
But there's a question here: do you have to be the party of life in the Murdoch-Aiken way? Because obviously that way didn't work out. That gave away seats that were in the bag.
Well, so, I think that Marco Rubio is probably equally pro-life to Aiken and Murdoch, and yet the way that he communicates it is vastly different and vastly superior to the way that they did.
So you think that in that respect, it's just a communication issue. You don't think the party has to make it clear at this point, we are okay with exceptions for rape and incest. We are okay for exceptions for life of the mother. We are okay with contraception coverage under Obamacare. We're not trying to take away your contraception. You don't think that any kind? I mean, there's a pretty mild calibration.
I think that should be on the table. I think it's a debate to have. I mean, look, the problem is, as you know, Bill, it is philosophically inconsistent and intellectually dishonest to say that all life is precious and you believe that abortion is murder, and yet to have exceptions. I mean, that's essentially what Murdoch and Aiken were trying to say. God loves this child no matter what. Having said that, I think you can make a very good argument that, look, the world is messy, politics is messy, and we can save a lot of lives and win the political argument by taking that off the table. And so it's not good, it's not preferable, but this is a compromise that for political purposes will mean that more babies get to live. And I think that's a completely inconsistent intellectual argument, but I think it's a completely legitimate political position to take, or it's at least worth considering.
I mean, that to me seems to be, in one sense, I would think a simple fix. I mean, there have been plenty of Republican politicians in the last 30 years that have run on those exceptions. It's not like it's all that unusual for Republicans to do. This is the only time I think in our lifetimes when seats have been essentially given up by being an absolutist on the subject. And there was all this stuff during the campaign that Obama was being condescending, having this war on women rubric, and Campbell Brown had this op-ed in the New York Times that Obama was condescending, and he's not going the women's vote this way. You had the Republican liaison to women saying that women know that contraception is just the cost of a latte, and they think the economy is more important. And all these people were talking at women and not listening to women, because women actually heard the messages from both sides and said, you know what the Republicans are talking about is scaring the crap out of me. But it's something that seems easily solvable. You don't have to be pro-choice to solve that problem. You could just make that slight adjustment and just take the things off the table.
I think that there are a couple of things at play here. I mean, clearly you've got this sort of epistemic closure where these Midwestern politicians like Murdoch and Aiken, who've sort of surrounded themselves by like believers, can't communicate effectively the way that a Marco Rubio, a cosmopolitan conservative, which is what I'm advocating here, can make the case for life. And Rubio gave, I think, the best pro-life speech I've ever heard in my life at the Susan B. Anthony-less dinner a year or two ago. Everyone, look it up on YouTube. It was inspiring and amazing. And that's, I mean, to me, life to me is a non-negotiable issue. But having said that, I think the other thing at play here is that conservatives are in some ways a victim of their own success. I mean, that what I'm saying is that they had effectively won on the life issue because of, I mean, look, I'm about to have, my second son any day now, and we got an ultrasound, and we got a 3D ultrasound, a picture of him. I mean, one of the doctors actually told my wife, I mean, there's a baby inside of you. I mean, he was, Anyway, my point is that I think that conservatives for a long time were on offense, and they were talking about partial birth abortion, and Democrats and liberals were on defense. But I think that once you start sort of win an issue, you end up the last inch or two, the last yard is the toughest. And so eventually Republicans and conservatives quit talking about life and stopping partial birth abortion and started expanding out into let's get rid of all abortion. Right? Now, there's an argument for this, the Overton window, as we've talked about before. But, and by the way, we did hang out. We did play ping pong. People should know this. We hung out recently. You visit, as soon as we're done with this, I want you to tell everybody about the Daily Caller offices.
I've been in the inner sanctum of the Tucker Carlson empire. I can tell you, I've lived to tell the tale.
But so there's an argument to be made that conservatives should have kept pushing and essentially try to ban all abortion, and that by doing, even if they failed, they would have expanded the Overton window and made everything else seem moderate in comparison. But I think you can also argue that they sort of got out there a little bit too far, and they were sort of spending 90% of their time talking about the weakest 10% of their argument. They should be talking about the unborn and defending life in a culture of life, and instead they're talking about rape and things that are very difficult, even if you're right philosophically and theologically, very difficult to argue and win if you're a 50-year-old white dude living in Missouri.
Do you have more to say about the Republican situation? I want to shift to the Obama mandate question, but I didn't want to cut off the discussion if there's more you wanted to say.
Yeah, I'd love to know, because as much as I think this was a disaster, I don't think that Obama has a mandate per se, because I don't think anybody does. 2 years ago, we felt that Republicans had the wind at their back, and I think that we borrow our mandate, and it's very fleeting, and the public is very fickle. But that's my take. What do you think?
Well, just to start off with, this is the first president since Reagan to have back-to-back popular vote majorities. It's the first Democrat since FDR to have back-to-back popular vote majorities. This doesn't happen every day. Now, granted, those majorities that Obama had are not as wide as what Reagan had and what FDR had. But still, considering the weak track record of such victories at all, I still think it's significant. And this is after a pretty active presidency up against some serious economic headwinds. So I don't think it can be discounted so easily to say that there's no mandate here at all. I mean, he ran on Obamacare, on the Recovery Act, on the auto bailout, on women's reproductive issues, on immigration reform, on raising taxes on the wealthy, and won, a pretty broad, if not terribly deep. It's 50% to 48% as it stands. It still covers a pretty wide stretch of the country, and it certainly suggests that the things the Republicans were saying about that agenda, that this is wildly socialist agenda that's going to drive us into the dead abyss. The country didn't buy that. So it certainly lends the argument that Obama can continue to advocate for policies in that same wheelhouse and survive and gain seats, gain some. I mean, North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp is, I think, pretty. I don't know if they've called that yet, but she's got the edge. She ran on Obama. Did she win? I mean, she ran on raising taxes on the wealthy. She ran on the big popular parts of Obamacare. She didn't run a total. She was, I think, pretty pro-oil. I'm not saying she was down the line liberal, but there's some pretty big chunks of that agenda that she did not run away from. So there's certainly something to be said that Obama has some kind of mandate. I'm not arguing it's a mandate to do whatever he wants whenever he wants it. You still have to sell your individual policies as you go. But I think it takes the sting out of the argument that if you get behind Obama on these things, that it's somehow political suicide, because once he was able to marshal his arguments and have a good coordinated message, he was able to sell those issues. Now, the first thing, I'll leave it there. Let you respond.
No, I think, number one, I think it's clear that the country is changing. I think that certainly, I don't know if what happened in the Senate was a virtue of Obama's coattails or just the environment, or both. But in turn, and I will also agree. I think Obama now, barring some sort of major setback or scandal, I mean, he goes down in history as really, the best liberal since FDR, right? I mean, he has already changed the trajectory of America in a way that Bill Clinton did not and could not. I mean, Bill Clinton was still living in the Reagan era, under the cloud of Ronald Reagan, and he tried to, and he had to, he basically, in order to win, in order for a Democrat to win, and he only got like 42% of the vote anyway, right?
But he 43 the first time, 49 the second time.
But he had to run as a centrist New Democrat and say that the era of big government is over and welfare as we know it and all that stuff. But Obama is being a liberal and getting away with it. And that is something that could not and did not happen for a generation. And it's a big deal. And it emboldens other liberals. So in that sense, I think he has a legacy now. Look, the stakes were huge for him. He could have either been FDR or Jimmy Carter by virtue of, of what happened last night. And he is very much set up now to have a great legacy. I will push back against the mandate thing just because my philosophy is politicians always get burned when they think they have a mandate. They should assume they don't have a mandate in the sense that the public doesn't grant them kind of the imprimatur to just push through, ram through an agenda. You always have to be selling the public and persuading the public and teaching the public and bringing them with you. You can't assume we won the election, so now for the next 4 years I can ram through my agenda.
I 100% agree with that. And when you look at the mistakes, look, most second terms are busts. They're not terribly productive. And there's two main reasons for that. One is scandal. Either Reagan, Iran-Contra, or Clinton and Lewinsky. Those things can suck out a lot of political capital. But the other is overreach. And the classic example, this is FDR. I mean, FDR had an enormous second-term election victory. I mean, he blew Alf Landon away, and the final speech before that victory was the famous the corporations are unanimous in their hatred of me, and I wear their hatred with the badge of honor. And he went on to say that when he won, he was going to be their master. His aides were aghast, and he was laying it on so thick. But because he laid it on so thick, and because he won by a massive margin, he really thought that the people were intrinsically with him, and he did not have to sell an argument to them. They would just be there. And so instead of sticking to the economy, he went out of the box with packing the court, which he did not run on. And it was a huge political disaster. And
smart politicians know it's like courting, It's like even being married. You never quit courting your sweetheart. You never quit bringing flowers or whatever. You don't take them for granted. And the public, oftentimes feels taken for granted. You can't just assume that they're with you.
Right. So, and FDR had that problem. The polling was very poor for it. The court that actually made an adjustment in their ideology. Some credit Rose's proposal for that, although there's some historical evidence that actually was not because of that the court was moving that direction anyway. But even after they made that move, the Democrats begged him, okay, drop the proposal or water it down or something. You got half a loaf here, and he still wouldn't do it. And he drove it into the ground. And he drove those conservative Democrats into the Republicans' arms. Roosevelt was so mad about it, they tried to purge them in the 1938 midterm elections, and that backfired, and he solidified this conservative coalition against them in Congress, which befuddled his domestic agenda for the rest of his presidency. Even though he kept winning, he was still a beloved figure. But his reform efforts really got, and obviously World War II got in the way of the domestic reform also. So look, I'm not arguing that Obama gets free reign. What I am saying is, when Obama proposes immigration reform, when Obama proposes another American Jobs Act, if or when he proposes a broader solution to climate change, I think Republicans would be in their interest to take a breath and hear him out and not just go into knee-jerk obstructionist mode again. Particularly, depending on what district you're from, I'm sure there's some Republicans in deep red districts where it's obviously going to be in their interest. But some of the Republicans who are in more pinkish hues might say to themselves, you know what, Obama's won twice on this agenda. Maybe I should work with this guy and find a way to meet him halfway, and that might not behoove me, behoove the country, maybe behoove the party to say, we're not so completely recalcitrant in every single issue, because Obama's got some juice in this accord. I think that's what it means. Not that he should, that he doesn't have to try to sell things or that everyone should just bow down before him, but I think he's got the upper hand in a lot of these debates.
Well, look, I think I don't think it's good to be obstructionist for the case of being obstructionist. But having said that, you can read too much. I don't want to, as much as I think that Republicans should take the election very seriously, especially the demographic time bomb that awaits if they continue to losing Hispanics. I also think you don't want to be overwrought about this. Obama gets elected in 2008. The next year, we elect Republican governors in Virginia and New Jersey. The next year, Republicans take back the House of Representatives. So, and Scott Brown gets elected in a special election in Massachusetts. So, I think that it's a mistake to read too much into it, and that it very well could be that that next year Chris Christie's reelected, Virginia elects a Republican governor, and that Republicans do quite well in the midterm elections by being recalcitrant. So,
because this is the one Obama was trying to get at in his speech last night. He's certainly trying to push back on that notion that it's in your political interest to be obstructionist again. And I think he's certainly trying to at least generate some national sentiment that, or at least build upon what's already there, that people are just sick of the arguing. And there are things that people want solved and want you to get that business solved.
One petty partisan point, which is that Harry Reid, everybody talks about Mitch McConnell, saying that his number one goal was defeating Barack Obama, and they say that happened immediately after Obama's election. It actually happened 2 years after Obama was elected. Harry Reid essentially vowed before Mitt Romney of course he wasn't elected, but before he even had a chance to be elected, that his efforts at bipartisanship would be dead on arrival. I mean, this is a bipartisan gridlock, certainly. It's not just Republicans who aren't going along.
Well, I think either party is going to try to throttle the other party if they think it's in their political interest to do so. Both on the policy grounds, on the political grounds. If they think they can get away with it, they will. What Obama's trying to do is to make it hard for them to politically get away with it, and say, look, we've been through this. We had debates about this. We've hashed this out. We've aired our arguments. Look, I won again. So let's be big boys and girls and sit across the table and work this stuff out. Now that's only going to move. I don't expect it to move all Republicans. I think Obama expects to move all Republicans.
Again, I would say though, conventional wisdom has burned us so many times. I hate to cite any historical artists, but look, history would imply that second terms. I mean, President Obama is now a lame duck, and there will be people jockeying for position to be the next Democratic nominee. There will be all sorts of things. There will be people in his administration who leave, who, the best and brightest that he brought in with him will now leave to go to the private sector or to switch to other jobs or whatever. So, George W. Bush gets elected in 2004. He gets reelected. He pushes for, to fix Social Security reform. Bill, you would call it privatizing Social Security. That falls flat, and he's done. He's done. Ronald Reagan, even the great Ronald Reagan, I don't know that he had such a great second term compared to his first. I mean, he did, essentially defeat the Soviet Union, but otherwise...
the tax reform was the big thing.
So you get my point, though. I mean, look, if you're a Republican, you could just, hey, we're going to ride this thing out, man. This is
the question. I mean, people talk about lame ducks being lame, and if he's not going to run again, what does he have over you? You ride it out. But it may be, but I think it comes down to what does it mean to be a lame duck in the modern era in a political area that is more person-based and less party-based. In the old days, to be a lame duck was that you no longer controlled the party machinery as much, and therefore you had less weight to throw around. And, Obama doesn't have that same kind of weight to throw around in the first term. Obama doesn't get to lord, pork projects over certain Congress people and get his way because of that. He can't throw out political favors for plum appointed offices to their friends to get legislation. It's not the way the game is played right now. So I don't know if the same lame duck obstacles apply, What does potentially apply is, what kind of juice do you bring to the table? Even if you're not running again, if you're still perceived, if your agenda is still perceived as a politically popular agenda, and it's going to be perceived that you are going to lose your House seat or your Senate seat in 2014 if your people expect you to work with this president this time around, then the fact that Obama is a lame duck is irrelevant because he has a certain degree of wind at his back still. It doesn't matter. There's a primary battle going on, under the surface. But that's what Obama's trying to generate here. He's trying to generate a sentiment that it will be in your political interest to work with me,
right?
Because that's what the public is expecting of you.
Right. Look, here's the big test. I think the question is going to be, and I don't know the answer for this, but I think the question is going to be, and by the way, I mean, you were much more right than I was. I mean, I thought it was absurd to believe that Obama's turnout model would rival what he did in 2008. And and you thought, well, why do you say that? To me, it just seems absurd. It seems absurd. And I don't know that it was as good as 2008. I don't think it was as good.
Well, we don't have less popular votes, but it looks like Robert have less than McCain, too.
But you were more right than I was. Let's be clear about that. So, but having said that, the one thing we don't know is what happens when Barack Obama is not on the ticket. Do young people and minorities turn out in these high numbers when Obama's not on the ticket? Will they turn out? Do they turn out for Hillary Clinton? I don't know.
I mean, it's a big question, and it arguably cuts both ways as far as the policy debate is concerned. If this is a cult of personality deal, and you just love Obama, you don't really care about other Democrats, then that certainly puts other Democrats in a weak place. Two things. So what if it's about Obama the person? Then it's less issues based, and therefore Obama's stance on the issues may not be as politically threatening to you to oppose him. Because if I'm not going to be opposing you, Barack Obama, in the election, just your policies, and I think people don't actually like your policies, I'll take my chances on obstructing you still. If it is seen as the Obama agenda that is popular, and other Democrats might think, how can I replicate Obama here? How can I be more like Obama so I will get that turnout in 2016? The way I'm going to get that is to show that I'm working with him and helping him and working across the aisle to get his stuff done. Then the fact that he has been the leading edge in stoking this turnout still helps him with the mandate question, because that will have some ripple effect going forward. But these are the questions that people are going to have to ask themselves when Obama goes to them and asks for their support. They're going to have to calculate how much this is about the issues and how much this is about you, and how do both those things affect me when it comes to my election time in 2 to 4 years.
All right, I'm exhausted, but let's talk. I want you to tell about your experience coming into my house.
So I was down in D.C. last week before the election. I got to do a debate at American University with one of Matt's colleagues, Jim Antle from the Daily Caller, and also Tim Kavanaugh, who's at Reason. It was sponsored by Young Americans for Liberty, which is a group that comes out of the Students for Ron Paul organization, and they've been doing campus debates all around the country. So it's actually, you can still get on C-SPAN's website. I don't know if they're still rerunning it on air, but we had a good 2-hour chat. And since I was in town, Matt invited me up to the offices there. What's most striking of the Daily Caller is if you're there at 8 in the morning, nobody's there but Matt. So I don't know what it says about conservative work ethic, but or if they're just terribly efficient. There's high productivity at the Daily Caller. But they do have, as far as belying the image of a very staid conservative office, they do have almost half the office is a giant room with a bar and a ping pong table.
This is true.
So let it not be said that conservatives don't know how to have fun. How do I work?
You're not bad at table tennis. I beat you, but I think it's probably because you haven't played in a while.
I am rusty, but I did get
trained. If you trained, we could have a hell of a game.
but I respect the hell out of you for being there. I think you had a great gig there, and obviously, I guess Tucker Carlson has a hell of a poster collection and a political memorabilia collection that he shares on the wall there. If you peek into his office, you can catch some of it too. And so it's neat of him to keep that semi-public in the office and not just hoard that at home, because he has a lot of neat stuff.
Well, I'm glad you were able to come by, and thank you for that, and thank you for the lovely baby gift.
My pleasure.
You and your wife gave us
some handcrafted wood toys from the woods here, from the deep in the forest.
Very cool. I love this wooden toys. They stay, this plastic stuff today. We don't need that. We want, and for all you viewers and listeners, we do accept. Yes. So
Ron Swanson approved wood gifts are always welcome.
Indeed. All right, Bill. Well, we could talk and talk and talk, but I suspect we are both tired, and that there will be a lot of discussion and debate in the days and weeks to come about this election. We probably don't need to solve all the world's problems in one sitting.
But always good to talk to you, Matt. And I express my apologies of the election results, but I know you are undeterred, and you are wise enough to know that you learn from elections you lose, and don't despair.
Look, I think it's healthy to be a little introspective and to take a little time and do some self-examination. And yes, you keep going, you keep fighting, but it's also healthy to step back and look at that man in the mirror, as Michael Jackson would say. So that's what we should do for a little time.
Till next week, sir.
All right. See you back here on the DMZ.